they asked me my opinion. And in my opinion, it's not appropriate for young underage children to be exposed to sexually explicit material without the consent of their parents. I made that view known to the museum. The museum can make their own decisions about their own direction and their own exhibits. I made my view known. It's up to the museum to decide now where they go.
That's James Moore talking about this sex exhibit at a museum here in Ottawa. MPs are hot and bothered over this sexually explicit exhibit that opened today at a federally funded museum, the Museum of Science and Technology. The Heritage Minister, James Moore, was highly critical, as you saw, of the provocative new display. It's called Sex, a tell-all exhibit. It's already been to Regina and Montreal. He called the exhibit an insult to taxpayers. Opposition MPs accused him of being, well, they say he's a prude, but after running without any controversy in Regina and Montreal, the new exhibit is causing a stir, and even though it's now been restricted to people 16 years and older. Now, a video piece about masturbation has been removed from it, but it raises questions. Is the National Science Museum an appropriate venue for this kind of exhibit? And is it appropriate for the minister to weigh in on the content of museums' decisions as to what to exhibit? Let's get MPs weighing in. Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, Dean Del Mastro, is here. NDP's Deputy Heritage Critic, Andrew Cash, is here. And the Ontario Liberal MP, Carolyn Bennett, here. Gents and Carolyn Bennett, thanks for being here. Dean Del Mastro, what's the problem with this exhibit? Because we've talked to the museum. They say no federal funds go to this exhibit directly. They go to the museum itself. What's the problem here?
Well, first of all, it's beyond the scope of the mandate for the Museum of Science and Technology, whose mandate is to foster a greater understanding of science and technology, of which this is neither one of those. And of course, this museum is federally funded. It wouldn't exist without federal funds. Museums were specifically, their funding was specifically maintained through all of the deficit reduction action plan. So they were given a special free pass because of the value that they offer to Canadian taxpayers. We don't think that Canadian taxpayers feel that this is the appropriate venue. I can tell you I've heard from a significant number of my constituents on this issue that are quite upset about it.
But have you seen it? Have you been there to see it?
Well, I think an awful lot of folks have actually had the opportunity to view it online and to see pictures and to actually read about what's there. They're deeply concerned about this kind of exposition being presented to young children. They think it's inappropriate, but it's really inappropriate for the Museum of Science and Technology. It's definitely not science and technology.
Can I just ask you, just before, I mean, clearly it's science. I mean,
it's called biology, Dean. It's called biology.
You know, no, it's not called biology. It's called many
biology.
things, but it's not biology, Dr. Bennett.
Well, Dean Del Mastro, they say, I'm just reading from what they say, it's a tactful approach. They say they developed this this whole museum in conjunction with health specialists, medical doctors, a committee of experts, educational sexologists, the whole, and they talk about life sciences and body science and biology. Should the government, without even seeing it in this case, should they really be commenting on the choices of a museum? I mean, is that wading too far into the process?
Well, Minister Moore did, in fact, take the opportunity before he said anything about it to go and see the exhibit to understand exactly what it was that was causing such a fuss. He looked at it, found it to be inappropriate for young children. And as I said, it's beyond the scope of the Museum of Science and Technology. Now, of course, I hear Carolyn Bennett laughing again. She should take some of the angry calls from parents in my riding that are concerned about this kind of material being presented to young children. I understand they have now changed the age, but even now understanding that they have done something that the public finds unacceptable for young people to be seeing this, it still has to be asked, what does this have to do with science and technology?
All right, Carolyn Bennett, your response, what is it?
Well, I'd love to take those calls in that this is really important. It's a difficult subject for some parents to deal with their children, and we know that if we can provide an entry where parents feel comfortable talking about these things with their children, that we end up with children with much more healthy sex attitudes that mean less teen pregnancies, less sexually transmitted diseases. This is about an educational piece, and frankly, I don't think that the government has any business in the museums of the nation. This is clearly the minister is not the curator, and if the cops are okay, then the government should just lay off. This is art. I don't know whether Dean Del Mastro, will he not let his...
This is
does
not
he
art.
think that children should get to see Da Vinci? This is ridiculous.
All right, Andrew Cash, I should say I'm reading off their website, the museum. They say this was developed through a scientific lens, the exhibit, thanks to the cooperation between the Montreal Science Centre and the Scientific Committee. You've seen it, I understand, Andrew Cash. What's your view?
Yeah, yes, I have, and it should be noted that Dean hasn't seen it, and you know, if you're going to comment on it, you should go and see it.
I don't want to see it.
And you know, this government's had problems with science in the past, so it's no surprise in a way. But listen, the most inappropriate thing about this exhibit is the minister weighing in and micromanaging professional experts who run the museum. And listen, this museum or this exhibit had a long run in Montreal and in Regina, and it was fine. There was barely you know, any stir at all. And I think that it's a little cute by half to say that the minister you know, was just expressing his personal opinion, because you know, he did through his office say that this was a waste of taxpayers' money, you know, or an insult to taxpayers. An insult to taxpayers is a $1,000 limo ride and a $16 glass of orange juice.
So Dean Del Mastro, you just said you didn't want to see it.
Nope.
I don't get. Why not? Like, well, how do you want to comment on something that you won't even see? I don't get that. Why?
Well, I've seen photos, Evan. I believe you flashed some images of it. I mean, people can go to their average adult video store if they want to see this.
But
come
on.
But
That's not even close.
let's be clear here,
Are
Evan.
you comparing it? Because, you know, all this stuff they say jibes with what's in curriculum for sex education in schools. Are you comparing this to pornography?
I think this goes quite a bit farther than what we see for sexual education in school. Certainly farther than what I received as far as sexual education is in schools. But you think that's a problem, Carolyn? You know what's a problem?
You know what is a problem?
The problem. No, excuse me, Mr. Cash. I'm happy.
Dean Del Mastro, and then Andrew, go ahead.
Then we'll come back to you,
ahead.
Andrew.
What's
And
the
then we'll
problem?
come back to you. Me, then you.
Go ahead,
Okay,
Mr.
so
Del Mastro.
anyhow, what's really offensive with this, and this is why parents are calling me, is because they don't have a choice. And this is what the minister is in fact saying. We put in place a board. The board is there, and believe me, they are responsible to Canadian taxpayers. And what we're hearing from Canadian taxpayers overwhelmingly is that they don't feel that this is an appropriate expenditure of taxpayers' dollars, and it is certainly not.
But are you putting a chill?
Is
When the government says this, do you put a chill on curators and museums so the only thing they can show is what's aligned with what the minister likes?
Well, I think that when a museum is specifically given a mandate, and again, the mandate of this museum is to foster a greater understanding of science and technology. I'm not having anyone in my riding call me, I can assure you, and tell me that they think that this exhibit is science and technology.
Carolyn, Andrew Cash and Carolyn, but you wanted to respond to that.
Well, you know, Evan, as a parent of a teenager, I can tell you that this is the toughest conversation you have with your kids. And if there are resources out there that foster a better understanding of sexuality at a very crucial point in a teenager's life, then I think this is a good thing. What's a bad thing is to see the minister wading in, as he has several times in the past, and as this government does often, in jurisdictions in areas that should be arm's length from the government. They don't want anyone who disagrees with them to have a voice. And in terms of taxpayers, listen, this is a government that's posted the biggest deficit in Canadian history. Their ministers trot around at $1,000 limo rides. I don't think Canadians need to be hectored by this government about how to spend taxpayer money.
Well, I mean, this is it. I mean, Carolyn Bennett, is it within the minister's right to say
Absolutely
the federal
not.
government should not fund things that they say are an insult to taxpayers? Or is that overstepping the bounds?
It's completely overstepping the bounds. We fund institutions, and then it's up to the curators to decide what exhibitions to put on. This is a really important exhibition in being able to find a place. This is also a matter of choice in that the parents choose whether to take their children here. It was expressly designed for young teens as an entry-level conversation with their parents. That was the purpose of this exhibit, and that's why, you know, I think that the parents who have discomfort with this, and some of this is so upsetting that a few angry letters into some of these constituencies. I would like Dean Del Mastro to give me the list. I'll call the parents and explain why they actually need to have these serious conversations with their children, so that they can have a healthy sex life, as opposed to this Victorian nanny state now we've got of conservatives and conservatism that thinks that life science isn't science.
All right, before I got about 10 seconds, Mr. Del Mastro, I just got to get an answer. Does it put a chill on institutions when they know that the Minister of Heritage, who's in charge of this funding, if he doesn't like an exhibit, will say it's an insult to taxpayers? Does that put a chill on what should be arm's length institutions who may have the freedom to curate their own exhibits?
I think any institutions that are receiving public funding, have public boards responsible for them, should always be aware that they are ultimately accountable to the taxpayers, Evan. That's the bottom line.
All right, again, I'll say no federal funding, according to the museum, went directly to the exhibit, but does go to the museum. They say the museum paid the Museum of Montreal $10,000 a month to have this exhibit, $60,000. They say they'll recoup that through visitors. So that's the way it is.
So therefore, they recoup nothing from the tickets for the rest of the museum.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, that's the museum's making these choices. We're not. We'll figure out if they should or they shouldn't. But Dean Del Mastro, Andrew Cash, and Carolyn Bennett, I appreciate your time on this one. Fascinating discussion.
Thank you.